let's start with the facts. The jury said on the big charges, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. And there's the possibility of minimal jail time. Diddy kneeled on the ground at the end and prayed into his chair. The lawyers hugged, and his 6 children and his mother stood in the front row, and they all clapped together. The headlines spun it, the fans argued, but does legal clearance for Diddy mean moral innocence? In a world where survivors rarely get justice and the industry protects its own, some folks are wondering, did Diddy dodge accountability? Or did the media create a villain out of a mogul? Plus, it's not just a trial. It's not just about his freedom. It's about his family. It's about his health. It's about his legacy. We've got guests today directly from the courtroom and the industry who will give us a post-verdict reaction unlike any other show. You know how we do it. Let's get into it. Right now, it's Truth Talks.
Are y'all ready to roll? Let's go.
All right, truth tellers, we're about to get into it. Let's bring in the star of the show, Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. How are you?
What's going on, Truth Avengers? Your favorite doc, Dr. Bryant. Super excited to get into this conversation because we got experts on. They're going to give us a much deeper dive on just the legal logistics of this. Again, what this means for Diddy's family, for his legacy, and all that good stuff. And we've all been talking about it on the internet, everywhere. And you're going to hear a lot of exclusives of the inside stuff only here on True Talk.
All right, let's get into it. Segment 1, the main topic, the new trial of the century. The jury said not guilty on all the big charges, but the case is far from settled in the court of public opinion. Diddy beat the RICO case and the sex trafficking, but the whispers are loud, the internet's on fire, and the survivors are being vocal. Let's be real. Black celebrity and justice don't play by the same rules. Billionaires move differently. Evidence disappears, witnesses go silent, NDAs become the new shackles. The question is, were we watching justice or another performance? Take a look at this.
The jury found Sean Diddy Combs not guilty of racketeering conspiracy and sex trafficking. He was found guilty of arranging transportation to engage in prostitution. The verdict is seen as a big win for the defense.
The government has to have their tail between their legs. This is just a huge loss for them. They went out on a limb, and the jury, saw it the way the defense saw it.
Prosecutors argued the hip-hop mogul was the leader of what they described as a criminal enterprise over 2 decades, one that forced women into engaging into abusive sex acts during drug-fueled parties he called freak-offs. Their star witness was Combs' former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura.
Whether or not the freak-offs cross that line from maybe morally questionable or seriously questionable to illegal, I think that's where things broke down for the prosecution.
Combs' family members showed their support in the courtroom, where the defense argued all sexual encounters were consensual. They accused the prosecution of putting Combs on trial for his lifestyle, trying to criminalize his private conduct. The jury of 8 men and 4 women sifted through 28 days of testimony, much of it graphic and emotional.
The court of public opinion was on fire when the verdict was announced. There were heavy reactions on all sides. We saw folks pouring baby oil on people to celebrate out in front of the courthouse. We saw a lot of women be disgusted and hurt by the verdict. This is what the comedian Lunel had to say. So, ladies, we're dead in the water. People are cheering for this nasty man. Nobody, and I mean nobody, cares about what men do to women. It's sad AF to me. All his enablers and helpers, they just get to skip away scot-free. Hurry, run, and get your baby oil and let the freak-offs begin again. That's really sad, and I know that there are a lot of people, Dr. Bryant, women who are feeling kind of heavy after this verdict and maybe not heard.
Yeah, to your point, Tori, I think a lot of women felt like this trial would have been the voice to a lot of their victimization even if their victimization wasn't at the hands of Diddy, but it was at the hands of their own perpetrator. I think they were depending on this case to be an advocate and a voice for them that says, hey, look, women cannot be, treated any kind of way. And that abuse is something that obviously, our country and the justice system does not play with when it comes to anyone, but in this case, in particular, women. And so I do feel like there's a big, dent in the Me Too movement of women who are saying, wait a minute, what happened to justice, right? What happened to us having the agency of saying no, even if we said yes 500 times, that 501 time that I say no means no. And there is no price on our body. There's no price on our mental health, and there's no price on trauma and how it affects us. So yeah, I can see a loud voice from the women community, but there's also on the flip side, a lot of women who are saying, listen, she wanted this, or she set herself up for this, and she wanted what came with the lifestyle and the money and the entertainment business, and she got what she wanted. And in exchange, he wanted just that, freak offs, and wanted her available and wanted her to be at his beck and call. And so you have a lot of different moving parts of groups of people who have different opinions about this. And this is what makes this case such a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I see some of that. I also think that in this trial, we were talking about the persistence of love in abusive and toxic relationships and trauma bonding, and how the music industry has people end up being controlled quite often. And the audience wasn't listening, and they kept saying, why didn't she just leave? She explained to you the many ways that she was trapped, yet why didn't she just leave? As Black people, did we actually win in this situation? I'm not sure. I want to bring in my first guest, YouTube influencer Armon Wiggins, who was at the courthouse. I talked to him. We actually met at the courthouse in the overflow room. Armon was dragged a little bit, maybe a lot, for pouring baby oil on himself outside the courthouse after the verdict was announced. He was the guy you saw getting baby oiled precipitously out in front of the courthouse. Armon, there you are. Oh, welcome to the show.
Here we are.
Let's take a look at what some folks have said and hear your reaction.
Oh, gosh.
Wow. Wow. He was hitting it. Wow.
At least I went to the gym that day.
I'll give you that. You're all, listening now. You did apologize for that. I think we have a card with your apology, because you were known as a reporter, and you had your position, but you're a reporter. I don't remember any other reporters getting baby oil sprayed on them.
Yeah.
What was going through your mind when you were out there doing that?
First of all, who knew that, because I think that was the day you and I had really talked.
Yes.
And I think that I had no idea that day was going to manifest into this moment. But what was going through my mind, honestly, it wasn't even anything to do with Diddy. Honestly, it just was literally like the last day. And it was the fact that, my audience, every time since the day I've been covering this case, and we found out that, one of Diddy's things was more oil, and the escorts always had to have more oil on them, and he'd have to tell Cassie, we need more oil. That took wildfire on my channel when I was talking about it, right? And then so that just became a thing. So then we turned it into the More Oil Fund, where people would send me donations. We even had more oil merchandise people don't know about. But people got shirts, t-shirts. This is all before this moment. So people would send money in, because I'm not from New York. So I'm staying here. I got an Airbnb. So people would send in to the More Oil Fund, which meant they would send me money so that I could stay here and cover the case for the 8 weeks. So it was a running thing within my community. And so in person, I was just it's the last day. I was with another YouTube content creator, and I was like, you know what? I want to get a bottle of baby oil, because I think this would just be great to do a little thing for More Oil on our stream right here, because I wasn't planning on doing a live stream at home because everything was happening in that moment, right? So I just was like, all right. He was like, well, I actually got baby oil and Astroglide right here. I was like, you do?
I think part of what it is, I think some people are like, you're a reporter reporting on the case, and then you're seeming to celebrate the outcome.
Well, absolutely. That's what it looked like, right? Because everybody was up in arms. And to be honest with you, to be 100% honest with you, none of those people right there were celebrating Diddy. Honestly, they were just actually just yelling more oil with me. But in context, in hindsight, it looks like everybody was celebrating the fact that he got, less charges, or he got convicted on the 2 charges. But that literally had nothing to do with it.
It wasn't about celebrating Diddy.
It wasn't about celebrating Diddy at all. And you and I were just talking in the courtroom, and you knew that, where I stood with it. I thought he was guilty, but the problem is the prosecution wasn't able to prove the RICO, and I feel like it wasn't clear enough on the sex trafficking. You could see it if you wanted to see it, but it was also vague enough. If you didn't want to see it, you could not see it. The one thing that you could see was the transportation for prostitution. So I stood on that the entire time. But it just was the timing. So I had to eat that, and I apologize for it. And I really meaned it, because there was a lot of people that didn't know me, and that was more than upset. I feel like some people were disappointed because they were like, you were doing so good, and we were all rooting for you, and then here's the headline that's going to be a part of your legacy. And for me, that may be a little truth to it, but if you've been watching me, that's kind of been my thing the entire time.
Okay. All right. I want to bring in one more friend to the conversation, an anchor who was inside the courtroom. Me and Armon were in the overflow room, but like the really special reporters were inside the courtroom.
Hey, don't do that, because I was in the courtroom sometimes too, just not on that day.
Sometimes. But Dara Kennedy, Truth Talk special global correspondent, was in the courtroom every day throughout the trial. Dara, how are you?
I'm good. You know what? Thank you, Torre, for having me on. Can I just say something about Armon? By the way, we had dinner that night, and that's what took you so long to get to the restaurant, because you needed to go home and shower off all of that baby oil. And I just learned Astroglide too. I mean, wow, that was a moment. I was actually doing a live hit, looked over, and I was like, what is going on? And it's Armon over there with his shirt off. Now, see, I look at that as a way that really shows what community was about from the entire time of this trial. Yes, I was inside the courtroom every day, but Armon was out there with the people doing his show, talking to his community. Remember, the community and the culture has a louder voice in this trial than those of us few 21 media members that were chosen every day for 8 weeks to sit in that courtroom.
But I want to hear about your experience in the courtroom and the things that you saw and the vibe in there. And the way that Diddy was kind of like looking around a lot and talking to people, looked at you, did he not?
Listen, I'll be honest. I came after the first week or 2 weeks, or I forget now when it was. Puff looked up, we made eye contact. He did the head nod, he smiled, and I kind of was like, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I may have gone to a white party back in the day, but I never stayed late. So don't look at me like you remember me, because I was one of 1,000 people that attended those parties. But what I learned is that he continued, Puff did, or Diddy or Sean Combs, continued to engage with the members of the media. We sat on the right side, so I was directly to his right, and he would be able to look back and see directly. But then he also engaged with the juries and jurors. And what we know is that the judge said he needs to stop that. He needs to stop whatever contact he's making with the jurors to stop making
after
friends.
The judge told him to stop?
Absolutely. I'm going to say 99% he stopped. But as the trial got toward it, during closing arguments, his head nod game was on fleek. He was looking at the jury, making eye contact. He was upright in his seat. He would often, hold a conference with his family once the judge was off the bench. I mean, and I didn't even know that was allowed, especially in federal cases when you're facing racketeering in New York City. He would just hold a conference, and sometimes they would hold hands and pray in a group. Other times he was telling them, listen, we got this. We need to stay strong. And by that time, the court marshals and the court security officers, they were telling everybody to clear the court so he could have that moment. But what we were able to see
Yeah, you told me that he would have time alone in the courtroom with his family after everyone else was ushered out at the end of the day.
That is right. I mean, and at one point they locked the doors. They said, you guys got to get out and don't come back for a while. Lock the doors. And it had to be at least 15 minutes. We're talking about we're waiting to go back into the room. And they shut it down for 15 minutes so that he could have this time with his family. You know, one thing I do want to point out, when the verdict was read, Sean turned around to his family and I saw him directly in my eyesight, and he mouthed the words, "I'm coming home, baby, I'm coming home." And he said that to his family. And of course, now we know that he actually is not coming home, at least for a while. And at one point, Touré, he raised his hand. Like, you know, remember in grad school or in grade school, he raised his hand to talk to the judge. And, you know, the judge acknowledged him, but he said, hey, you know, Mr. Agnifilo, let's get back to actually this bond hearing. You know, Puffy was never heard by the judge, but he was on the edge of his seat. It was really remarkable to see.
When I think back through the trial and the key charge being sex trafficking with respect to Cassie, I think one of the key problems for the prosecution was that at one point she said, "I'm always ready for a freak off, LOL." And I think people clung to that and held on to that as a reason to say maybe she liked it. And I think there was just like little things that pierced the many hours that she spent on the stand saying, "I hated
5 days.
This." And the contemporaneous messages that she's saying, "I hated this." But then there's a couple. Armon, what do you think about this notion, and dare you two, about those little texts that she said seem to outweigh this mountain of her saying, "I didn't like it"?
Well, I think also, you know, and this is not me, so I don't want the people out there killing me, but I also think that they did a good job, if you want to be honest, you know, streaming a timeline together of her sexual history and her past, making her look like she was a girl of the night, even though she was young, but she always dated older men and she always seemed to have like a sexual energy about her. She cheated on her first guy to be with Diddy, you know, so it always showed that she was always sexual. So perhaps the jurors was like, well, this is nothing new to her. She was with it because she thought she was going to get a music career. And then once she found out that Kim Porter was the girl of his dreams or the love of his life, then it became a problem. Because that's when Cassie really got upset.
Armon, what's wrong with a woman being sexual? And so that's not coming from Derek Kennedy. That's actually what Mark Agnifilo said in his closing.
Yeah,
Cassie likes sex. Good for her. She's a sexy woman. It seemed a little creepy at the time, but when you look at the way he presented her, he said she liked sex. What is wrong with that in this day and age? What is wrong with that? A woman that enjoys that. Now, Touré, me and you, you know, I love you to death. We've been friends for a very long time. But I told you from the jump. What did I tell you, Touré? Tell the people what I told you. Listen, I want you to pat me on my back right here, because I told you it was going to be on transportation that he would be guilty, and all the rest of it was no. People could not understand those charges. I sat in that courtroom every day. Eyebrows were like, huh? And then some people literally were like, where's the RICO? Some people, you know, there's a juror that I call her Biggie. Y'all not going to know who she is. I call her Biggie. And she was basically over it after the Cassie testimony. The prosecution didn't bring anything, people. They did not bring it. And Touré, I know you feel like this man is guilty. He is a criminal of these charges, but he is not guilty in the jury's eyes.
No, I agree with that I think he did a lot of horrible things. I personally think that he did force Cassie into doing these things. Maybe she was with it at the very beginning, but at an early point, it becomes coercive and forced with the blackmail, with the violence, with the economic control through the record deal and all these sort of things.
That's all very logical.
But the government was not able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in a legal context that it reached a criminal standard. So there's a huge gap. We all may know, we know Pookie killed Ray Ray. Could you go in a court of law and prove it? No, yes. I could not. But so it's like that. And I appreciate that difference in that the government should have to have a high bar where they can take away somebody's liberty. Hold on. I want to bring back in Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, who's fixed some of the tech problems. So and I want to give you a chance to just jump into the conversation because part of what we're getting into is Cassie not being fully believed. We had a jury of 8 men and 4 women, Doc. And some people were like, oh, 8 men are not going to. But other people have said, no, wait, women are very harsh judges of other women in a lot of contexts. And this may be one of those contexts where the women were like, no, we don't see it.
Yeah, but not only the jury obviously didn't see it or apply her to being a victim in this case based on evidence. A lot of part of the world didn't see it like that either. I've said this to you before, Touré, that it's not so much men. It is a lot of women who are saying, wait a minute, how much of this did you want? How much of it was just not sex that you wanted, but was a record deal, a lifestyle, entertainment, money? How much of that was a part of your pay to play?
If I can jump in on that, she was 19 years old.
Yeah.
She was a 19-year-old starving artist or a wannabe artist who came to New York City with big dreams. Remember being 19? Now imagine being a woman and a woman of color, and you have an opportunity. You're already dating a man in Ryan Leslie who's much older than you, but he's in the music business and he's promising to produce you. Now he takes you to meet Sean Diddy Puff Daddy Combs at 19. And so what women, what I just heard Dr. Brian saying is that some women are looking at this and saying, well, didn't she want it? There's a pattern over time to where your brain forms, but you can be manipulated. That's actually how abuse happens, right? You can be manipulated and your mind isn't even fully developed at the age of 19.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
He's a highly manipulative, powerful micromanager, alpha, sociopath, sex addict, leader. But hold on, Armon. I want to bring it back in, but I want to bring in 2 legal minds who viewers of the show already know and love. Judge Lauren Lake, Gerald Griggs. You guys, I want you to come and talk a little bit about what I think is sort of where the big charge was sex trafficking with respect to Cassie. And I think it turns on, despite her saying, Lauren, I hated it. But a couple of times you texted that you liked it. I'm always ready to freak off. LOL. I think that text was misunderstood, but I think a lot of people clung to those couple of moments to say, oh, I don't have to believe her.
Watching this case from afar and watching the legal antics that are happening in the courtroom, I think we just have to focus on the elements of the crime and what the government has to prove. And they failed to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, you have to have coercion, you have to have some type of duress, some type of force. And if she says one time that I was willing to do it, that sinks your case. And so I think from the very inception of this case, I never saw RICO and I never saw sex trafficking. Now, again, they did a great job in the press conference leading up to this, laying out the indictment and doing all the things necessary to get media attention on it. But from the very inception, the question I was asking was, where is the evidence, the proof beyond a reasonable doubt? And clearly in this case, they were not able to carry that burden. And that's why the jury came back the way it did.
Gerald, every day in the courtroom, we wondered the same thing. We were wondering, so what's next? When is the thing going to be the thing? When is something going to drop to make us say, oh, that's the RICO? And it never came.
Yeah.
Armon, let's go back to the jury point, because 8 men, 4 women, you were in there a couple of times. So you did see the jury in their face. What do you think about the jury composition in regards to the verdict?
Some people will say, that the juries were making all these different faces and laughing in it. I mean, maybe I wasn't in there at that time, but I was seeing a lot of stone faces. In my mind, I felt like it was going to be like men versus women. But at the end of the day, I think there was 2 particular jurors they weren't buying it. Like, they were clearly for the defense. Like, I think you could tell that they were just like, this is BS. But I think a lot of that happened once Cassie dropped that $30 million, that extra $10 million that she got from the Intercontinental. I was like, oh, this is not good. This is done. And I think that's when a lot of women started feeling some type of way too. Like, people don't like to hear when you've got a lot of money, and they start to get upset. So they don't feel bad for you anymore. So what? She got kicked. So what? She got dragged. She already got paid for it. That kept reoccurring in the courtroom too. And so I see a lot of people, even outside the courtroom, they're talking, Cassie's got $30 million. When they found out she got an extra 10 million, you could feel. I was in the courtroom that day, and they said, "Well, how much money did you get?" She said 10 million, and you could hear it. Everybody, whoo, like, but it was like internal. Like everybody started looking like, "Bitch really got $30 million," and then you could feel the sympathy for her just kind of fade. In my opinion.
Tara, talk about your point of view during the trial and how it may have grown or changed as we moved through it.
Great question, Torre, because I think my mood changed, right? We first went in and I was like, well, I can't believe that this is the guy, a cultural icon that, I went to his parties growing up, and, someone that you looked up to that was so important in fashion and music and movies and Broadway and all the things. And then here we are sitting in the courtroom and this man may never come home again. And then right around actually what Armon was talking about, when the money started coming in, I started asking myself, what is the government doing? Is this about trying to, and now I'm going to sound like the people out on the streets, the people in the culture, in the community, is the government trying to take this Black man's assets? Are they trying to take his money? What is really the purpose of this right here? Because you're not bringing in a single witness as a co-conspirator. So now is this just about money, or is this about justice? Is this about tearing down a man in a culture which clearly the government had no idea? You could tell by all of their attorneys on the case. None of them look like New York City, the state, or the country, the makeup of those attorneys. So what is this really about? Right. And so that was my question. Towards the end, I just started feeling like the government just did not present the case that they promised the American people they were going to present.
Gerald, what do you think about that notion that Dara's teasing there, that the government is really after sort of taking a Black man's power rather than actually pursuing justice?
Well, what you have to know is the makeup of that particular U.S. Attorney's Office shifted during the course of this prosecution. So initially you had Attorney Damon Williams, who was a U.S. attorney, and then you had an election and then a change. And so again, the prosecution team did not reflect the beliefs and the system in New York. And I think they were not able to connect with the culture of the jurors with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Again, as she said, when you have a RICO, you may not have everybody charged, but you have unindicted co-conspirators come in and testify about the criminal enterprise and how it helped facilitate the sex trafficking. That was the difference in this case and, of course, the R. Kelly case. And then you have there. You have the proof that there was a conspiracy to do these things by showing pieces of evidence. So I think she's correct. I think that perception is reality. I think they should have had African-American prosecutors on the case to assist in the case if they really want to make the case in this case.
Armon, take me into the courtroom and the courthouse from your perspective, and what did the average person not see that was really going on here?
I think that was what was actually interesting. What would be the dynamics, like when you're in the courtroom or like you're in the overflow room and then you're navigating like through the lunchtime, right? And like for me specifically, like when you're doing these videos and then you have to go to the bathroom and Quincy's in the bathroom or King is in the bathroom, or then you're in the cafeteria and you're ordering a bagel, but then it's like you kind of want to talk about, Cassie saying that she's got cold sores all in her mouth and been urinated on and we're all gagging, but then you got the son right behind you. It's like, it was kind of like they know you and they kind of want to get a feel for who you are, but then you don't want to really make eye contact because you're like, what are they thinking? Huh?
Do you interact with any of the kids?
So King said what's up to me once. I was like, oh, he must have seen the video. He talked to me in the cafeteria. He was like, what's up? And I was like, what's up? You know what I mean? But I try not to look at them. Quincy, I feel like he had the most pressure. He never talked. He just always looked like he was like, I'm not doing this with nobody. He was very cold. You know what I mean? Came dressed nice every day. He was dressed. He was the best dressed out of the whole series. Okay. But he didn't really talk, but I feel like he had to lead everyone, and I would see them taking notes. And what was interesting is like, I felt like King, Christian, he would be like really like paying attention. And he was really close to the grandmother. A lot of people didn't see that. That little boy and his grandmother, he loved her. He always made sure he sat next to her, put his arm around her, and he made sure that he walked her out every time.
Why did you perceive that Quincy had more pressure than the other kids?
Well, because he's the oldest one, right? And he's got Diddy's being a stepdad. He's got the stuff with Albie Shore, his biological father. His mom's passed away, and everybody's looking at him like, how are you going to handle it? Because in that courtroom, I know that they're superstar kids, but they look like little kids not knowing what's going to happen to their dad.
That
you know what
is
I mean?
a very good point. Those kids' demeanor every day, it was
like,
meek. They were never, you never saw them crying. You never saw them break down, but they were quite meek. And Quincy was very focused. Now, I spoke to the mother. I spoke to Mama Combs every single day. I spoke to the kids as well. I talked to the twins. How are you doing? They're getting ready for prom. Congratulations, getting ready to go to grad. Because remember, these are teenagers. They were seniors in high school, getting ready for prom and all the fun things and graduation. And they were flying back and forth from LA. Mama Combs told me on multiple occasions she was staying strong. And I asked her right before the verdict, how are you feeling? And she said, baby, I gave it up to God. I gave it up to God. I saw her the next day. I didn't even ask her. She said, I gave it up to God again. And she just said how she was doing. And I talked to one of the handlers of the daughters as well, and just said, what's their mindset? Because they come in stoic every day. But there was one day we caught one of the twins kind of wiping her eyes as she was walking out of the courtroom. And I said, that's the first emotion that we've seen from the girls. Now, when they were in the back, to Armon's point, when they weren't in the cafeteria and they were kind of huddled, you would see them just kind of trying to get love for each other after some of that damning testimony. One day when I was in the courthouse, I mean, with the sex tapes and the videos, and the girls had to get
they had to leave. They had to leave the courtroom.
Yeah, it was hard for the girls to hear the real salacious stuff, right? Like they
were in there for the urinate, the pee talk, the piss talk. They were in there for that.
They were in there for that, and then they never came back again.
Yeah, what did they do? How did they react after that?
That's when they left. Well, they left.
They did leave. Yep. But what I noticed, and I wrote this in my notes, and he's right, before they left, they couldn't look at the screen. So the girls would not turn, because the TV monitor would be on their right side, and they wouldn't look. When the CNN video was playing, they would look up and their heads would go down like that. And then they would just start passing notes, and then they would go like this and their heads would go down. They could not watch that video of their dad kicking the mess out of this woman, Cassie, who has been in their lives for the last decade as well. Since they were 8 years old, they have known Cassie. So their heads went down.
Armon, it's an interesting split because the boys, Christian, Quincy, and Justin, are grown and older, and they had a stoicism about themselves and a sort of like flair, like, we're going to deal with this. And then the three teenage girls, the twins and Chance, they seemed much more fragile throughout this.
I don't know, because I feel like, Quincy was the only one to me that felt like really strong, because Christian and Justin, they weren't sure. They were passing the notes too, but it got to a point towards the end where I felt like they got like media coaching or media training, the whole family, because towards the end, because we were looking for things and they wouldn't give us anything.
Wait a minute. Yes or no? King clearly seemed high the whole time. I mean, right? Like
I think he was more like he was a little boy. He was looking at his dad, and he's probably thinking like, he was scared. He was sitting next to his grandmother, who he loved. These I didn't see celebrity kids in that courtroom that day. They have not heard this
information about their dad. They learned it when we were learning it. A lot of these details, the salaciousness, they learned it right there on the spot. And Armon is right. Justin, a lot of times, sometimes he was coming late. Sometimes he was falling asleep. Sometimes, I mean, and come on, everybody was falling asleep, but his head was nodding. But Quincy, to his point, was on top of it. King was like the baby. He was the baby.
Do you think that Diddy is telling them, you have to come to support me, even though hearing some of these stories may be difficult for you? Or they're like, no, we're going to be there to support you, Dad, no matter what?
To be honest with you, I feel like at this point, they know this stuff already. Like, I feel like Diddy is such a narcissist and so crazy that they're probably, it's probably some new stuff, but I feel like some of these girls was getting beat in front of them. I don't think they're surprised as we think they were. So I think they were coming to support their dad, to show face, because it would be all in the press if they weren't there. So I think a lot of this too was media training, media coaching.
There are lawsuits that allege at least Justin doing these sorts of things with his father. So
On a yacht.
This couldn't have been the first time that they heard about any of this shit, because at least they have been sued around these issues.
So, and to the point of them being there, not really quick, each one of them like slightly took vacation, because Quincy went on vacation for his birthday. He went out the country. The twins, after their graduation or for their birthdays, they were gone for a minute. Then they came back. So, and then there was times that King didn't come and Justin didn't come, and the mom and Charlucci were the only ones there consecutively throughout the entire time.
Gerald, would you normally expect the family to be sort of coached and like, hey guys, like this is how we're going to behave in this situation? Because I mean, you think the jury is just listening to the evidence, but they do see the family as well.
Absolutely. And I more than just media coaching, you have the lawyers telling them what they need to do and what not to do. And the fact is, every single moment in that courtroom, the jurors are watching everything. They're watching the support system. They're watching the defendants. They're watching the judge. They're watching the prosecution. But they're more keenly focused on the support that a criminal defendant has in the courtroom. And sometimes they say, listen, I went the way I went because I saw the support he had from the community. So I think clearly the lawyers, especially Attorney Brian Steele, would instill that in the family, to be there to make sure that they are stoic, but to also show some amount of humanity for their father who's on trial for his life.
Darren, there was also these moments when they were walking out of the courtroom each day that we stood, shoulder to shoulder for a couple of them. And there's this mixture of media trying to capture them visually and then fans screaming for them. And it became this sort of like, like people are cheering for you out here, but the spectacle is watching you. And what did you think of that part of it all?
It was remarkable. It was something that we've never seen. Maybe the O.J. Simpson trial had people like that out there back in the day. I think some of the dichotomy of this is the Sean Combs as the person, right? That's his legal name, Sean Combs, versus this image of Diddy and Puff Daddy and P. Diddy. Who were those people? We don't know who Sean Combs is. Maybe this is who Sean is. Maybe peeing on women and kicking the shit out of them in hallways is who Sean Combs actually is. And maybe really? Diddy is the guy that throws the White House, that throws the white parties and just likes to party. Where do the two intersect? And then how do we separate those two images? How do we separate the likeness of a Sean Combs and a P. Diddy? And I think the culture was cheering for P. Diddy. And I think in the courtroom, the guy that I saw every day, he only had 5 sweaters, 5 different colors with his baggy. I saw the cracks sometimes of his butt because his pants were too low and his hair untamed because it's silver, gray, and white. That to me was Sean Combs. Diddy is out there with the people that when the kids walked out, everybody was screaming. But we saw the real guy inside that courthouse, and that was Sean Combs. That was the guy that was humanized, who I saw get on his knees and thank God that he walked away from a racketeering lifetime charge.
But do you think he's changed? Because he didn't. I don't think he's changed.
No, I don't think.
The judge said no. Do you think you want this guy to walk out?
And do you feel like the 5 sweaters and the gray hair was all a part of like, look at me, I'm humble, I'm bringing myself down? I think it was all.
Well, the 5 sweaters is what he was allowed by the court.
It was negotiated.
Okay.
Yeah, that was not him humbling himself. Hold on, Gerald, you worked on
I'm sure he would have liked a belt, though. We didn't need to see all that crack.
Gerald, you worked on the R. Kelly case, and some people have said this is like the OJ trial in the size of it, perhaps like the Bill Cosby trial and some of the salacious details, but also like the R. Kelly case in that the government tried to use racketeering to bring down a big recording artist. There, it was successful. Here, it was not. What do you think about some of the similarities and differences between these two situations and what we're dealing with the Mann Act, which has, of course, some racist origins?
Yeah, I think they're similar, but I also think they're different because in R. Kelly, you had victims who testified, multiple victims, both men and women. And then you also had the actual proof of the transportation of individuals fueled by the criminal enterprise. The government was actually successful in bringing that element into the trial. And then you had, in this case, more competent criminal defense attorneys who were able to push back on what the government was trying to do. In the R. Kelly case, one of the closing arguments, they basically said he was guilty. And I mean, that was one of those moments like they really gave up. And so I think in this particular case, I think it should never have been brought in federal court. This is a domestic violence case. If it was brought in state court as a domestic violence case, he would have been convicted of all counts. But because they brought it as a RICO, and it seemed as though they were trying to take an African-American man down for something that was not a RICO, I think that's why you have so many people in the community saying they got it right. Now, I know that there are victims out there that saw this as the type of case that could continue to propel the Me Too movement, but they have to remember the Me Too movement has convictions. They have Harvey Weinstein, they have Bill Cosby, even though it was overturned on appeal, and they have R. Kelly. So this is not a setback. This is the government failing to produce a case and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Let's bring another legal mind that viewers of the show will know very well. We love Judge Lauren Lake. Welcome back. Curious of your opinions. You've been hearing the conversation so far. What are you thinking?
This case, I feel like will be studied in law schools at some point. This was fascinating to me. I am still baffled at why this was brought as a RICO charge. And let me be clear. This case was one of those things. Remember that joke we used to see all on the air where it used to be like what I thought I was getting versus what I got? Remember that joke? It would be like people getting their hair done. It'd be like, I thought I was getting my hair braided like this, but I end up looking like this. This is what I feel like happened in this trial, because we were set up with the Homeland Security and the Rays. They done put the children in handcuffs all over social media. We're hearing talks about these freak offs and everybody got to be naked and turn in their phone, and people got inside information, and this star was there and this star was there. And when this case started coming out, and I'm going to be very honest with you, I could not follow it tooth and nail. So thank God for you guys, Dara, Armon, for following it the way that you did and giving us this insider information. But as a former criminal defense attorney, every time I would get a little synopsis, all my little crew would be texting like, what you think now? And I kept texting back like, they don't have the RICO. And I just kept saying that back very quickly because I was like, they don't have it. And it's just, I don't know if are they not seeing it? And it didn't feel like they veered off course. It felt like they charted a course and it just wasn't good enough. The trailer was exciting, but the movie fell flat. And there was nothing they could do in that. And at the end of the day, for some reason, and I want to make one more point, Teray, just because I thought this was such a great point because I was listening before. When Armon was talking about being in there, the bathroom, studying the dynamics, those are the things that no written transcript can tell you. Mm-hmm. Those are the things, and I'm gonna be very honest with you, those are the things I was good at as a lawyer, as a defense attorney in the courtroom, right? I can tell a story. All right. And when I tell it, I can tell it in a way where the jury wants to listen to me. And I take that as a gift and honor, that I use hopefully for good. I felt like here, we might have been looking at the step-by-step of these transcripts in this testimony, but I kept saying to myself, Lord, I know the dynamic in there. It's like another juror. It's like another player. It's another witness. It's another thing. Like, what does it feel like when Diddy's looking directly at you? What does it feel like looking at the faces of his daughters, like you said, who know they love their father? They're going to miss their father. What does it mean when the defense attorneys are so skilled and so magnetic that when they talk, they're almost making a mockery of the case? And like, I felt like the prosecution was out-lawyered. And unfortunately, they did not make the case that the court of public opinion thought they were going to make. And last point, because those jurors weren't sequestered, they came out back into the court of public opinion, into our gallery every day and spent weekends in it. And if you think that didn't influence anybody, you're wrong. Okay, I'm shutting up. That's what I've been having on my chest.
But Lauren, I also think I want you to talk about the judge's performance also and how you think he did. But also this notion that some of us have been kicking around, that it seems that the prosecution set out a plan before they started this journey, and then life intruded on their plan. Suddenly, Cassie, because she was pregnant, she had to go first when normally she would go last. Another SA victim, victim 2, Gina, doesn't show up. They can't get Christina Karam to come on the stand and not be a hostile witness. So major parts of their plan are falling apart in front of them. I think that was a big hurdle for the government.
Yeah, you're correct. And you could see it in real time. But regardless of that, it's still that to me is your charge. That is what you're here to do. You then have to figure out, how do I ask the right questions to elicit answers? That it just felt very uneven. And like I said, I cannot speak to watching any of this. I never watched any of it. I'm only, as a former criminal defense attorney, I was watching how this felt. And as a defense attorney, I'm really kind of aligning myself in the defense position, right? Like, how are they defending this? How is that informing me? The way that they cross-examined Cassie, it signaled to me early on, there's parts of this that they knew the jury wasn't buying. I knew it in my gut. I didn't know because I didn't see it, but I felt it. Like, it's something about this story because of the way they matter-of-factly cross-examined her, did it skillfully. She's a pregnant woman. She was abused. She is a victim. And the way they asked the questions, when they didn't call any witnesses, I said, oh yeah, my gut is true. This is a very minimalistic approach because they really know that they haven't proven this case.
Gerald, speak to that.
If I can just real quick off of something Lauren just said, one of the attorneys, one of my defense attorney's sources, and when I said, so are you not calling any witnesses? The response to me was, what for?
Gerald, was the prosecution out-lawyered, as Dara and Lauren have suggested?
They were absolutely out-lawyered. You had some of the best criminal defense attorneys in the country cutting them to shreds. And I think that what they really need to recognize is the power of the government has been humbled at this point, because they had months to prepare for this. You can prepare for a hostile witness. You can prepare your witnesses for what cross-examination Brian Steele and others are going to give them, but you cannot prepare for legal skill and storytelling like Judge Lake just gave you. That is an exceptional closing argument. And I know the lawyers on the other side made exceptional closing arguments, but I want to push back on one thing. They didn't win because their client is still in custody and still facing 20 years in prison. So I want to push back on the narrative that it was a complete win for the defense. And I do think it was a mistake not calling a witness, because again, you can beat the top counts and your client still get the max. So I think they should have called at least one or two witnesses to dispel the moving of the individuals in violation of the Mann Act for the purpose of prosecution.
That was so clear. We were getting rid. We saw the bank records, the American Express records, the flight, like you weren't getting that. Oh no,
they had no way.
There was no way.
The defense had no way of winning on the
absolutely
charges. That was too easy. I mean, like, that's sort of like the government threw that in there, like, make sure you get something. Don't go.
Just
but
let us get something.
You know, he faced life. He faced 15 years. That's virtual life of a 55-year-old man. This is
faces 20. Your client didn't walk out with you.
Gerald, the last day in court,
absolutely
on the
a victory
time
for
spent.
Diddy.
Sorry.
Is he still in custody right now?
Could he have gotten the rest of his life?
I agree with you.
We went to battle with the government. Who wins 95% of the time.
And they got a conviction in his case. They got a 20-year conviction, and you'll probably get 5 to 7. So what I'm saying is you want to walk your client out of there. And the reason Johnny Cochran is great, because he walked OJ. He walked OJ. And so what I'm saying is I think it was a strategic mistake not to call a few witnesses to dispel the other 2 counts.
Lauren, what do you think about that?
I think it was one of those things where they had to really think about, do we leave well enough alone? What could we open here? Is it worth the potential cross-examination? What it could come out? And look, again, you're talking to somebody who's literally studying the synopsis that people are giving and saying to myself, when they didn't call the witnesses, it signaled to me, we're coming out of there. I mean, they're coming out of there with a not guilty on at least the larger counts. And I think as a defense attorney, while, as Gerald says, you of course fighting for your client to walk out, which I think they did fight for when it came to the bail. I do feel like there is a victory, if we want to call it a victory. I mean, let's also set some parameters here. We're talking about defense attorneys and prosecutions. And sometimes when we say victory, it's almost like we liken our court system like we're in a sporting event, right? When the truth is there are real victims, right? There are women here that have been harmed, but the jury did not believe that it rose to the level of trafficking or racketeering. And I do think for the defense, that is a huge victory. Now, Gerald is right. We still locked up. We still got to face a sentence. We still might not be going home. Although I don't know what the judge would base that on. We still have an opportunity to maybe have to serve these sentences consecutively. I don't know what's going to be recommended, and I don't know why the judge would do that given no priors. But he's right in that. We're still not free. So we do have to honor that. But, I think that was a victory. But can I just say this too? There is a phrase in sports that they use where they say when the kicker outkicks their coverage, right? And I'm from a football family. So that means the kicker kicks it so far that they ain't got time to get back down the field. And that's what I kept feeling like with this case, that they kicked that thing so far that this case was about to be the trial of the century. I don't think it was the trial of the century. And I mean, when I tell you, I felt like some of those, I shouldn't say this probably, but I especially not in this case, but some of those witnesses were beating a dead horse. And I don't think we should probably use that phrase after this court and everything we done heard in testimony, but you know what I'm saying. It was just like, my God, how long are we going to talk about the same thing? When are we going to have an aha moment? And I just think it fell short. It did. And at the end of the day, that's how our justice system works. And that's one last point I want to make, because it's an uncomfortable point. And as a former criminal defense attorney, I realize that we often look like Satan's sidekick, right? It looked like we just went on downtown to hell and aligned with Satan. And now we going to go get the bad guy and the monster. I get that. I have done this job. I have defended very imperfect people, but it has to work that way.
Yeah.
Because if you, and for any second, insert yourself, insert your brother, your mother, your father into that defendant's seat, you would want those attorneys to represent them, right, as vigorously as that team did.
No, I totally agree with that the government must make sure it has all the goods before you take away somebody's liberty, not just we don't like them. That's not enough. Dara, Kennedy, and Armon, thank you so much for your contributions today. This is the first part of a 3-part special where we're breaking down everything in regard to Diddy. So stick with us. This is the Truth Talks way. We're going to be back with Judge Lauren Lake and Gerald Griggs to dig into more of the legal aspect here. It's Truth Talks following the rise and fall of Diddy, a bad boy special.